A young mother was forced to give up her baby's formula. But what happened next would change two lives forever. No one noticed her at first. Under the bright lights of a Value Mart grocery store, Lena Carter stood frozen at the checkout, holding a small stack of bills and loose change in her hands. She was 27 years old, exhausted and completely alone. At home, her baby daughter Chloe was waiting. Chloe needed a special formula, the kind that cost more than Lena had. Lena already knew the price. She had counted it in her head all the way to the store, but knowing the number didn't make it easier to hear it out loud. "That'll be $23.98, the cashier said. Lena swallowed. Her fingers tightened around her money. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I have to put this one back." With a small shake of her hand, she slid the can of formula across the counter. It was a moment no mother is ever ready for. The line behind her shifted. Someone sighed. Someone else checked their phone. But what Lena didn't know was that someone else was watching. A stranger standing just a few feet away. A man who would make a choice in that moment, one that would reach far beyond a grocery store, far beyond that night. Because sometimes a single act of kindness doesn't just help someone survive. Sometimes it changes everything. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if you enjoy emotional stories about resilience, love, and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe to Soul Strength Stories. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. It was late evening at the Value Mart on Kingston Avenue. The store wasn't busy anymore. The lights felt too bright, and the floors echoed with every cart that rolled past. Lena Carter stood in the baby aisle, holding her phone in one hand and a can of formula in the other. Her cart had only a few items inside: bread, diapers, and a small jar of applesauce. She tapped numbers into her phone, then stopped. She looked down into her purse. A few bills, loose coins at the bottom. She looked back at the price tag on the shelf, the same number she had already seen twice. Lena slowly placed the formula back where she found it. She pushed it in so it lined up perfectly with the others, like no one had touched it. Then she stood there for a moment, her hand still on the shelf, before pulling it back and gripping the cart. At the end of the aisle, a man paused. Daniel Hayes had come in for coffee and frozen food, nothing more, but he noticed the way Lena stood still, the way she didn't move right away after putting the formula back. He didn't stare, he didn't walk closer, he just noticed. Lena pushed her cart toward the front of the store. At the checkout, she chose the slow line. The cashier was older and patient. Lena placed her items on the belt carefully, then took the cash out of her purse and smoothed it flat on the counter. The cashier scanned the bread, the diapers, the applesauce. "That'll be $14.37, she said. Lena nodded. She slid the bills forward, then counted out coins one by one. One coin slipped toward the edge, and she caught it quickly, her breath tight. Behind her, Daniel set his basket down. He watched her hands, how careful they were. The receipt printed. The cashier smiled. "Have a good night." "You too," Lena said. She reached for her bags just as Daniel stepped forward. He placed a can of blue-labeled formula on the counter with his items. Lena turned fast. "Oh, sorry, that's not—" "It's mine," Daniel said gently. "I forgot it earlier." She shook her head. "No, I put that back." "I know," he said. The cashier looked at them, waiting. "I can't take that," Lena said. Her voice stayed calm, but her fingers curled around the cart handle. Daniel slid his card into the reader. "It's okay." "You don't have to." "I want to." The machine beeped. Payment approved. The cashier rang everything up, including the formula. She placed it in the bag on top. Daniel lifted the bags and placed them into Lena's cart. For a moment, Lena didn't move. Then she let out a slow breath. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome," Daniel replied. Outside, the parking lot was dim and cool. Lena opened the back door of her car and placed the bags inside. She paused with her hand on the formula, as if checking that it was really there. Daniel stood a few steps away. "I live near Oakwood Terrace. I'm fine." He nodded. "It's late. I can follow you." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I'd like to," he said simply. She studied his face, then sighed. "Okay, just there." They drove in separate cars. Daniel stayed behind her the whole way. At Oakwood Terrace, a quiet apartment complex with weak porch lights, they parked. Daniel picked up the grocery bags. "I can get them," Lena said. "I've got it," he replied. Inside her apartment, the lights were low. A baby monitor hummed softly on the counter. "She's asleep," Lena said. "My daughter, Chloe." Daniel nodded. "How old?" "6 months." He smiled a little. "That's nice." She checked the bag again and pulled out the formula, holding it for a moment. "Thank you," she said again, more firmly this time. "You're welcome," he said. "You handled tonight well." She shook her head. "Didn't feel like it." "I know." They walked to the door. "Good night, Lena," he said. "Good night, Daniel." She watched from inside as he walked to his car and drove away. When the lot was quiet again, she closed the door. In the kitchen, Lena placed the formula carefully in the cabinet. She stood there for a second, then turned off the light and sat at the table, waiting for midnight. The next few days moved fast and slow at the same time. Lena learned Chloe's new rhythm by sound, not by clock. A soft cry around 1 in the morning, a louder one closer to 4. Lena would lift herself off the couch quietly, careful not to knock the coffee table, and warm the bottle in the dark kitchen. She checked the formula every time before scooping it, like she was afraid it might be gone. Chloe drank with her eyes half closed, one small hand gripping Lena's finger. Lena sat on the edge of the couch, back curved, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the low noise from the street outside. When Chloe finished, Lena held her upright, rubbing her back until the small body relaxed again. By morning, Lena's eyes burned from lack of sleep. She dropped Chloe off at the sitter's apartment 2 buildings down, kissed her soft cheek, and whispered promises she hoped she could keep. Then she drove across town to work, gripping the steering wheel through traffic. Her job at the call center paid just enough to keep things barely standing. 8 hours of calm voice, polite words, and short breaks that never felt long enough. She checked her phone during lunch and saw 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. She ignored them. Bills waited on her kitchen table when she got home that night. Rent, electric, a medical bill folded twice, the total circled in red. She stacked them neatly and slid them under a folder, like order might make them smaller. She did not think about the man from the store. When she did, she pushed the thought away and focused on Chloe's laugh, the way it bubbled up when Lena bounced her on her knee. That was safer. Across town, Daniel Hayes sat in his office with the lights still on, long after everyone else had gone home. His desk was clean, except for a laptop, a glass of water, and a framed photo turned slightly to the side. The photo showed an older man in a military uniform, standing stiff beside a younger version of himself. Daniel's grandfather rarely talked about the war, but he kept the photo on the shelf, dusted, never moved. Daniel stared at the screen in front of him, reading the same email for the 3rd time without taking anything in. His mind kept drifting back to a grocery store aisle and a woman trying not to let her hands shake. He told himself it was nothing, just a moment, just being decent. Still, on his way home, he stopped at the same Value Mart without meaning to. He walked past the baby aisle and didn't stop this time. He bought coffee he didn't need and stood in line that moved too fast. At home, Daniel loosened his tie and dropped his keys into the bowl by the door. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. He poured himself a drink, then didn't touch it. On the wall near the hallway was another photo, this one older, faded. A group of soldiers standing in mud, arms over each other's shoulders. Daniel had grown up seeing it, hearing pieces of the story in half-finished sentences. "Wouldn't be here without him," his grandfather used to say. Nothing more. Daniel stood there longer than he meant to. Back at Oakwood Terrace, Lena checked her email late one night while Chloe slept. Mostly junk, store ads, a reminder about a past-due bill. Then one message caught her eye. Parkside Community Center. She frowned and opened it. The message was short, polite. It said she had been selected to apply for a new local grant focused on education and family support. It asked her to come in for a meeting. No dollar amount, no sponsor name, just a time and address. Lena read it twice. She checked the sender. It looked real. Her first thought was scam. Her second was that she didn't have time for hope. She closed the laptop. The next morning, she reopened it. She printed the email and folded it into her bag before she could change her mind. The Parkside Community Center sat between a laundromat and a small dentist's office. The sign out front was old but clean. Lena parked across the street and stayed in the car for a full minute, hands resting on the wheel. She checked the address again. Then she got out. Inside, the place smelled like coffee and paper. Flyers covered the walls. A few people sat in plastic chairs, talking quietly. Lena stepped forward, her bag tied against her side. She stopped just inside the door, unsure, careful, ready to turn around. Then she took another step forward. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled when Lena approached. "Can I help you?" "I got an email," Lena said, pulling the folded paper from her bag, "about a grant." The woman nodded. "You must be Lena Carter. They're waiting for you." That made Lena pause. "They are?" "Yes, second door on the left." Lena walked down the short hallway and stopped outside the office. She knocked once, then pushed the door open. Inside, two people sat at a small table, a man with glasses and a woman with a yellow notepad. Both stood when Lena entered. "Hi, Lena. I'm Marissa. This is Tom. Please have a seat." Lena sat, keeping her bag on her lap.
Marissa folded her hands. "We'll get right to it. We've started a new program here at Parkside. It's meant to help local parents who want to continue their education." Lena nodded slowly. "Okay." Tom slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "It covers tuition support, books, and childcare assistance." Lena stared at the paper. "All of that?" "Yes," Marissa said. "The goal is stability." Lena let out a small laugh before she could stop herself. "People don't usually give all that for free." Marissa smiled gently. "That's fair." "And who's paying for it?" Lena asked. "There's a private donor," Tom said. "They asked to stay anonymous." Lena's eyes moved back to the paper. At the top, printed in bold letters, was the name. "The Carter Heritage Grant." She blinked. Then she read it again. "That's my last name," she said. "Yes, the donor named the program." "Why?" Lena asked. "We don't have that information," Tom said honestly. "Only that the donor wanted to honor local family history." Lena leaned back in her chair. "This doesn't make sense." "We understand your concern," Marissa said. "There are no contracts beyond participation requirements. You attend school, you stay in good standing. That's it." Lena shook her head. "There's always something." Tom met her gaze. "You can say no." Lena thought of Chloe, the sitter, the bills under the folder, the formula in the cabinet. "When would this start?" she asked. "As soon as you enroll," Marissa said. Lena closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. "Okay," she said. "I'll try." The paperwork took longer than the meeting. Lena signed carefully, reading every line. When she left, her hands were shaking, but her steps felt lighter. Within weeks, things began to change. Lena enrolled at the community college 3 bus stops away. Her classes were early, but the childcare support meant she didn't rush through goodbyes anymore. She bought notebooks that weren't secondhand. She studied at the small table while Chloe napped. The bills still came, but they stacked up slower. At night, Lena sometimes caught herself thinking about the man from the store, wondering if he had anything to do with this. Then she told herself she was being foolish and went back to her notes. Across town, Daniel read the weekly updates sent from Parkside. No names, just progress reports. Enrollment confirmed. Attendance steady. He told himself that was enough. One evening, Daniel sat at his desk with a folder open in front of him. Inside were copies of old letters, scanned documents, and a yellowed military report. He had requested the files weeks earlier, not expecting much. His phone buzzed. Archive request complete. Daniel opened the file. There it was. A battlefield report. A name he recognized. Sergeant William Carter. The report described a rescue under fire, a wounded soldier pulled from open ground. That soldier's name followed. Private Thomas Hayes. Daniel leaned back in his chair, breath slow, heart heavy. It wasn't coincidence. It was a debt. Daniel spent the next few nights surrounded by papers instead of screens. The dining table in his apartment disappeared under folders, copies, and printed emails. He lined them up carefully, stacking related pages together, smoothing the edges like order mattered. One document was a field report. Another was a handwritten letter, scanned but still rough around the edges. The ink was faint, but the words were clear. Daniel read without rushing. Under heavy fire, Sergeant Carter advanced, refused evacuation, dragged PVT Hayes to cover. Daniel stopped reading and sat back in his chair. He rubbed a hand over his face and stared at the wall. On the table sat his grandfather's old dog tags, removed from a small wooden box Daniel had never opened before. He picked them up, the metal cool against his palm. He closed his fingers around them, then set them down carefully beside the report. He opened another file, a photograph. A group of soldiers, faces tired, some smiling. On the back, written in block letters, was a name. Bill Carter. Daniel exhaled slowly. This wasn't a favor. It wasn't kindness. It was something owed. The next morning, Daniel arrived early at the Hayes Family Foundation building. The conference room filled slowly, board members taking their seats, greeting each other with practiced ease. Victoria Sterling entered last. She moved with purpose, heels clicking against the floor, a slim tablet tucked under her arm. She nodded once to Daniel as she took her seat across the table. "Let's begin," she said before anyone else could. The meeting moved through its usual agenda: budget reviews, outreach programs. Then Victoria tapped her tablet. One item stands out: the Carter Heritage Grant. The room quieted. Daniel folded his hands on the table. Victoria continued. "This grant was created quickly. The donor is anonymous, and the first recipient appears to be a single individual." "It's a pilot program," Daniel said evenly.
Victoria looked at him. "With respect, Daniel, this foundation has standards. We don't fund personal projects without oversight." "It's not personal," he replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Then why the name?" Daniel met her gaze. "Because it honors a promise." A few board members shifted in their seats. Victoria's lips pressed together. Promises are not a financial strategy. Daniel slid a folder across the table. "This is documented history. A life saved. A family line continued." Victoria glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "History is important," she said, "but so is transparency." "What are you suggesting?" Daniel asked. "I'm suggesting we verify the recipient," Victoria said calmly. "Her background, her qualifications. Make sure this grant is being used properly." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "She's a student, a parent. She meets every requirement." Victoria smiled slightly. "Then an investigation should only confirm that." The meeting moved on, but the air had changed. Later in the hallway, Daniel watched Victoria speak quietly into her phone. She didn't look at him when she ended the call. As she walked away, she said over her shoulder, "I'll have my team take a closer look." Daniel stood still, the folder heavy in his hands. Across town, Lena sat at her kitchen table, highlighter in one hand, textbook open in front of her. Chloe slept in the next room. Lena had no idea anyone was watching, and Victoria Sterling had already started digging. The donor event was held on a Thursday evening at the Parkside Community Center. Lena almost didn't go. She stood in front of the mirror in her bathroom, adjusting a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit right. Chloe sat on the floor behind her, chewing on a soft toy. Lena bent down, kissed her head, and smiled. "I'll be back soon," she said quietly. At Parkside, folding chairs were set up in rows. A small stage stood at the front with a microphone and a banner that read "Community First." People filled the room slowly: staff, donors, local leaders. Lena stayed near the side wall, hands clasped, listening to her name being called softly by volunteers. "Just a few words," Marissa told her. "Nothing formal." Lena nodded, her heart beating fast. When Daniel walked in, he didn't expect to see her. He had come straight from work, jacket over his arm, scanning the room for familiar faces. He paused mid-step when he saw her standing near the stage, reading over note cards. For a second, he thought he was mistaken. Then she looked up. Their eyes met across the room. Lena's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the cards. Daniel felt the room fade a little, the noise dulling as memory rushed in, the grocery store lights, the blue can of formula, the quiet apartment. They both looked away at the same time. A few minutes later, Marissa tapped the microphone. "We'd like to invite one of our grant recipients to share her experience." Lena walked to the stage, legs stiff but steady. She didn't look at Daniel as she spoke, but she felt his attention on her the entire time. "This program helped me go back to school," she said. "It helped me take care of my daughter without choosing one need over another." Her voice stayed calm, simple, honest. When she finished, the room clapped. Daniel did too, harder than he meant to. Afterward, Lena slipped into the hallway, needing air. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, until footsteps approached. "I didn't know it was you," Daniel said. She opened her eyes. "You?" They stood there, both unsure where to start. "You did this?" she asked quietly. "I helped," he said. Her lips pressed together. "Why?" He hesitated. "I saw someone who needed support." "That night," she said, "at the store." "Yes." She studied him. "Is that all?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "I didn't want you to feel like you owed me." "I don't," she said quickly, then softer. "But I needed to know." "I know," he said. There was a pause, the kind that pulled instead of pushed. "Thank you," Lena said, "for believing I could do more." Daniel smiled. "You're doing it yourself."
They stood closer than before, not touching, a quiet understanding passing between them. Across the room, Victoria Sterling watched from near the refreshments table. Her eyes moved between Lena and Daniel, sharp and focused. She took a slow sip of her drink and kept watching. The shift was quiet at first. Lena noticed it in small ways. Conversations that stopped when she walked into a room, smiles that felt tight instead of warm, a pause before someone answered her question. At Parkside, a volunteer avoided sitting beside her during a workshop. Another asked casually, "So, how well do you know the donor?" Lena laughed it off, but the question stayed with her. At school, a classmate joked that Lena had connections. The tone was light, but the look wasn't. Lena started keeping her head down. She arrived early, left quickly, and stopped staying after events. She told herself she was being sensitive. Across town, Daniel sat in a meeting he hadn't expected to feel like a warning. "This is getting complicated," a senior advisor said carefully. "People are talking." Daniel leaned back. "About what?" "About you and the grant recipient." Daniel's jaw tightened. "There's nothing inappropriate. No one said there was, but perception matters. You might consider stepping back publicly." Daniel nodded once, though he didn't agree. That night, Lena asked Daniel to meet her at a small cafe near campus. It was late, quiet, almost empty. She didn't order anything. "People think I'm here because of you," she said, getting straight to it. Daniel watched her carefully. "You're here because you earned it."
"That's not what they're saying." He exhaled. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect—" "Am I a project?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Something you picked up because it made you feel good?" Daniel flinched. "No." "Then what am I?" she asked. He looked away for a moment, then back at her. "You're someone who matters." "That's not an answer." "I know," he said quietly. She stood up. "I need to know this is real, not charity, not pity." "It is," he said. She searched his face, then shook her head. "You're holding something back." Daniel didn't deny it. "I can't do this halfway," she said. "Not with my life, not with my daughter." She left before he could stop her. The next morning, Victoria Sterling sent an email to the board. Subject: Carter Heritage Grant. Review required. By afternoon, the grant was officially under reconsideration. Victoria leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "This needs to end," she said softly. The email arrived just after noon. Lena was sitting in the campus library, Chloe's photo open on her phone when the message notification appeared. Parkside Community Center. Her chest tightened before she even opened it. Subject: Grant Status Update. She read it once, then again. The Carter Heritage Grant was under formal review. Funding could be paused during the process. Further details would follow. Lena closed her laptop slowly. The room felt too quiet. She gathered her books, stuffing them into her bag without care, then walked out into the hallway, her steps uneven. That night, she sat at her kitchen table staring at her class schedule. She picked up a pen, then set it down. She imagined telling Chloe's sitter she wouldn't need the help anymore. Imagined telling herself she'd tried. Her phone buzzed. Daniel's name. She stared at it until it stopped. Then, she called him back.
They met in the parking lot outside her apartment, the same place where he had once stood with grocery bags in his hands. "This is happening because of you," Lena said the moment she stepped out of her car. Daniel nodded. "I know." "My grant is under review," she said. "Everything I worked for is hanging by a thread. I'm going to fix it." She shook her head. "You already did enough." He took a step closer. "Lena, listen to me." "No," she said, "you listen. I can't keep wondering if my life only moves forward because someone decided it should. That's not what this is." "Then tell me what it is," she demanded. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "You still won't tell me." "I need one more day," he said. "Please." She laughed once, bitter. "That's what you said last time." She stepped back. "I'm not waiting anymore." She turned and walked toward her building. "Lena!" Daniel called. She didn't stop. Daniel stood alone in the lot long after her door closed. Then he pulled the folder from his car and sat on the hood, flipping through the documents under the streetlight. He made the call that night. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, and this time Daniel was ready to tell the whole truth. The Hayes Family Foundation boardroom was quiet when Lena walked in. Too quiet. The table was polished. Bottled water sat untouched at each seat. Lena kept her shoulders back as she took the chair near the end, hands folded in her lap. She wore the same blazer from the Parkside event. It still didn't fit right. Across the table, Victoria Sterling sat straight, tablet in front of her, eyes sharp and ready. Daniel hadn't arrived yet. Victoria began without delay. "We are here to review the Carter Heritage Grant," she said. "Concerns have been raised about favoritism, lack of transparency, and improper influence." Lena lifted her chin. She didn't speak. Victoria tapped her screen. "The recipient was selected quickly. The donor has personal contact with her. This creates the appearance of impropriety." Lena took a breath. "May I respond?" Victoria nodded, already sure of herself. "I applied for the grant. I met every requirement. I attend class. I use the child care support. I followed every rule." She looked around the table. "I didn't ask who the donor was. I didn't know." A murmur moved through the room. Victoria smiled thinly. "Intentions aside, appearances matter." The door opened. Daniel walked in carrying a thick folder.
"Then let's talk about facts," he said. All eyes turned to him. He placed the folder on the table and opened it. This grant was never about favoritism. He slid copies of documents across the table: military records, field reports, photographs. "My grandfather," Daniel continued, "is alive because Sergeant William Carter pulled him out of open fire during the war." Lena's breath caught. Daniel didn't look at her. He kept his voice steady. "That act saved my family line. This grant honors that debt." Victoria stiffened. "That's a story, not policy." Daniel pointed to the documents. "It's documented history." Silence filled the room. One board member picked up a report. Another leaned closer. Victoria's jaw tightened. "This still doesn't explain." "It explains everything," Daniel said. "This is not charity. It's a promise kept." The chair cleared his throat. "The grant meets all foundation standards." Victoria said nothing. "The grant will continue," the chair said firmly. Lena stood before anyone could speak to her. She didn't look at Daniel as she walked out. The door closed softly behind her. 2 years passed. Not slowly, not quickly. Just steady. Lena crossed the stage at the community college on the warm May afternoon. Her name read clearly into the microphone. Chloe sat in the second row, legs swinging, clapping a beat too early. Lena smiled when she spotted her. After that day, life kept moving. The Carter Heritage Grant grew. What started as 1 award became 3, then 6. Parents, veterans' families, people who just needed a fair start. Lena ran the program from a small office at the Hayes Family Foundation, her name printed cleanly on the door. She kept the rules strict and the process fair. She remembered how it felt to sit in a chair and not know if help would vanish. Daniel came by often, not as a savior, just as Daniel. They moved carefully at first, talked things through, took their time. Trust didn't rush anymore. Chloe called him Gan at first, then one day added Daddy without asking anyone's permission. Daniel froze when it happened. Lena laughed and wiped her eyes. Their apartment grew louder. More shoes by the door, more dishes in the sink. The walls carried music, cartoons, late-night talks. Some things never fully healed. Lena still checked her bank account too often. Daniel still carried guilt he didn't name. They didn't pretend otherwise. One evening, after Chloe fell asleep, they sat together on the couch. The window was open. Street noise drifted in. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lena asked. Daniel nodded. "All the time." She smiled softly. "I almost didn't take the formula." "I'm glad you did," he said. They sat in silence, hands touching. A simple moment. That was enough. The Parkside Community Center looked the same, but it felt different. Lena stood near the window of the main room, holding a clipboard, watching people take their seats. Parents, students, a few kids playing quietly near the back. Chloe sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring, her tongue sticking out in focus. Daniel walked up beside Lena and glanced around. "Full house. Waitlist, too," Lena said. 3 more grants starting next semester." He smiled. "You built something real." "We did," she said, correcting him without looking. Chloe looked up. "Mama, can I get juice?" Lena handed her a cup. Chloe took it and went back to coloring like nothing important was happening, which made everything feel important. Later, after the room cleared, Lena and Daniel sat on the edge of the small stage. Their feet dangled just above the floor. "Where do you see this going?" Daniel asked. Lena thought for a moment. "More support, fewer strings, people who don't have to beg." Daniel nodded. "That sounds right." Chloe climbed up between them and leaned against Lena's side. Daniel rested a hand on her back. "Funny," Lena said quietly, "how close I came to walking away." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then, "I'm glad you didn't." "So am I." They sat there, the room empty now, the lights dimmed low. No speeches, no promises made out loud, just the quiet truth between them. One moment, one choice, and everything after it. It didn't start with a miracle. It started with a tired mother, a grocery store, and a choice that almost didn't happen. One small act of kindness changed 2 lives and built a future neither of them could have imagined. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe to Soul Strength Stories. And if you believe kindness still matters, share this story with someone who needs it today.